We've all been there. You've got a cable that isn't laying flat or is just being a general pain in the butt. The connector at the end is broken, the little clip, so it doesn't lock in your port. I mean, cables are like the most boring thing ever, but they can have an incredibly big impact on your ability to do your job and get home. Now, for basic IT tasks, the simple monoprice cable should be good enough. But there's gotta be a better option, right? Let's find out. So I've been playing around with cables from different manufacturers trying to find the best one on the market. I have cables from Elite Core, Aria-Live, Monoprice, just outdoor cable, indoor cable, random cheap cable, and cable from Ubiquiti. So I want to go over all of these cables and then I want to narrow things down based on categories. All right, so I've gathered here a range of cables from different manufacturers. So starting things off, we have the Ubiquiti 8-meter patch cable. I just picked this up from the Ubiquiti store. We've got this cheap cable that I got from my old church, was just given to me because they were getting rid of it. So cheap random cable you probably found in your dad's drawer. Next, we have some installation. This is indoor installation cable that I just threw some terminations on. We also have outdoor installation cable that I threw terminations on as well. And we have the basic monoprice standard RJ45 Ethernet cable. This is Cat 6. And then we have the Aria-Live Flexsoft stage cable. So this is again an Ethernet cable designed for stage use, and it is made of rubber. And then we have the Elite Core Audio. This is the expensive cable. We have the Elite Core Audio ProCat 5E flexible stage grade Ethernet cable. So this one also has my logo on it, which is, I don't know, it's nice. To narrow things down, I have a list of categories, pun intended, for each of these cables to go through. Not every cable will pass each category, and once a cable fails a category, it gets thrown out. The first category that we have is overall feel and quality. Then we have data rating, so what are these cables each rated for? Then we have termination quality, so how good is the connection at each end? Then we're gonna take a look at flexibility in terms of how well these things lay on the ground, durability, and we're gonna then come back here and take a look at our final impressions on everything and see where everything stacks up. So without further ado, let's get into testing some cables. Hey, Editing Jack here. My analytics say that 98% of the people watching these videos aren't subscribed, and that probably means you're not subscribed. So if you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that button down below. It would really mean a lot, but thank you guys, and let's get back to the video. Starting off with overall quality and feel, we have the Ubiquiti 8-meter patch cable. Now, this patch cable is, it's made of this weird rubber textured material that just feels awful for a cable anything over a foot. So overall, I don't like the feel of this cable, and also, this cable has 8 conductors in it, each one with a plastic coating around them, and then a rubber coating around the whole thing. This cable is the same thickness as my fiber cable, which only has 2 tiny glass hair strands in. I don't trust this cable, so right off the bat, this cable gets disqualified. Also, it just feels terrible, so. Next up, we have the Aria-Live Flexsoft stage cable. Now, overall impressions of this cable is it feels nice to touch, feels like mic cable. It flexes like mic cable, which that's a good thing because mic cable is amazing to work with. And overall, this cable just feels like it's quality. It doesn't feel like it's a cheap cable that'll wear out super quickly. If I bend the cable, on cheap PVC shielded cables, if you can bend the cable and it turns a different color, it starts turning white, you can tell that they cut the PVC material with talcum powder in order to, reduce their costs. If I bend this isn't changing any colors. This is straight up made out of rubber. So this cable feels amazing. Next up, we have the monoprice cable here. Overall, the cable itself feels like it was made too thin, so you can see like the ribs of the Ethernet cable running through it, all the 8 conductors, and it doesn't feel terrible, but if you bend it, it starts turning white. So they clearly cut this PVC jacketing in order to save costs. And the connector ends are fine. Everything about this cable just feels fine. So, I mean, this passes, but no great remarks. Next up, we have the Elite Core Audio cable. Now, the Elite Core cable feels very similar to the Aria-Live cable, except for it is stiffer, and it's also a little bit thicker. Now, I'm not sure entirely off the top of my head what the Aria-Live cable is rated for, but I know that the Elite Core is only rated for Cat 5e. So with it being a thicker cable, that would lead me to believe that it's more durable, but overall it's a bit stiffer and harder to work with, and it feels like a really nice cable. The connector ends here are converter shells, so they're originally Ethercon connectors, but then you can take it off and there you have your regular RJ45 termination. And one thing to note about Elite Core is they will terminate this cable however you want. I selected the option to have these be converter shells. You can get them as booted RJ45s or regular Ethercon. So whatever you want, they will make for you. They also put my logo on the cable, which is awesome. And it only cost me like $2 to have the full color logo put on there. So I went ahead and did that. So next up, we're gonna take a look at this installation cable. Now installation cable varies because I don't exactly remember which brand this is, but it's nice cable. It's designed, you know, to be run in walls, so it feels stiff, it feels rigid. It doesn't feel though like it's something that I would want to use as a regular patch cable for when I'm out in the field doing networking. So it passes, but barely. Next up, we have the cheap cable that I got for free. And this cable feels decent, but if I bend it, the material was cut with talcum, and overall this cable just doesn't feel super great. It feels like it cost about $1. And last up, we have the outdoor rated cable. Now, the outdoor cable feels great. It's completely smooth and feels stiff, but that could also be a problem, seeing as if I try and straighten the cable out and let it go. This cable really likes to coil itself back up, which I see being a real problem for it when we get to the throw test. So other than that, it passes. Overall in this round, we've eliminated the Ubiquiti 8-meter patch cable. So in terms of data rating, first off, we have the monoprice cable. Now this cable is rated for Cat 6. So I have no reason to not trust that. I also did verify all of these cables that they were up to the standards that they were rated for, and the monoprice cable passed. I tested all of these cables through a Fluke cable tester, so this one gets a pass. Next, we have the cheap cable here, and this cable says that it's rated for Cat 6, but this cable is copper-clad aluminum. So with copper-clad aluminum, I would not trust this to run PoE. It does not handle 10 gig, and overall, this cable fails. So, goodbye. Next up, we have the Aria-Live cable. Now, Aria-Live doesn't exactly say what their cable standard is, but I tested this through the Fluke tester, and it came back as passing as Cat 6. So overall, this gets a pass, and good cable. Next up, we have the Elite Core audio cable. Now this is rated for Cat 5e, tested it through the Fluke tester, and it passed with flying colors. So let's move on to the installation cable. This is Cat 6 cable, so tested it, it passed. Overall, this cable passes my test. And last but not least, we have the outdoor rated Cat 6 cable. Now again, this is Cat 6 cable. Tested it through the Fluke, and it came back as saying that it was only rated for Cat 5e, which was a little bit weird. But I tested it again, and it passed as Cat 6. So I'm not sure whether that was my termination or just the test being weird, but yeah. So it said Cat 5e once, but overall it passed with Cat 6. Now let's get into how these cables are terminated. So starting off, we have the Elite Core audio cable. I'm gonna take it out of its Ethercon shell here so we can actually get to the nitty-gritties of the terminations. So if I pull everything off, strip everything back, if we zoom in here, you can see that they added some heat shrink to the end of the termination here, which is nice. Looking at it, they didn't use a pass-through connector or anything. This is a very well terminated cable. It is shielded and very nice. So we have the heat shrink, then we have a rubber bit here. Next we have this white retention clip. Then the Ethercon shell goes on, gets screwed up together, put on the rubber ring here for style points. Actually, this rubber ring helps provide friction and tension that helps keep the Ethercon barrel on. Overall, this cable is expertly terminated, hand built, so this is a nice cable. Next up, we have the cable that I terminated myself, the indoor regular installation cable. I just put some terminations on here quick and dirty. I do use pass-through connectors for my work. I prefer them, it just makes my life easier. So pulling back the boot, connectors well terminated, everything cut cleanly here, so I think I did a decent job. Next up, we have the Aria-Live Flexsoft stage cable. Now pulling this cable out, taking off the EtherCon end, we don't have the same heat shrink treatment done to this cable, but we have a longer rubber stopper piece here. I'm not sure what to call this. This was also terminated not using a pass-through connector, and we can see a little bit of solder here. So the ground wire, the drain wire in this cable that would make it a shielded cable, is only lifted on one end. Now for certain workloads, that's fine, but for a lot of workloads, this isn't great. So the other end of this cable does not have this solder ball here. It is only ground lifted on one end, which if you're running IP audio over this cable is fine. But if you're using something like the Sound Tools cat boxes, those use the ground wire of Ethernet as your ground wire for all of your audio, allowing you to use phantom power. So with it not being ground lifted on both ends, that could be a deal breaker for you if you're in that use case scenario. But overall, this cable is well terminated for what it's designed to be used for, so it gets a pass. I'm just gonna go ahead and put everything back together here. Next up, we have the monoprice cable. Now, the monoprice cable is terminated very well. I did cut off the rubber little protector over the clip here, but it is terminated in the style where the boot here goes actually into the Ethernet connector itself. So it's not gonna give way, it's not gonna pull loose. Overall, well terminated cable, it's held up over the years. This cable gets a pass. And last but not least, we have the outdoor cable. Now, outdoor cable is a pain in the butt to terminate. So I would not recommend anybody terminate this if this is their first time terminating cables. Start with something like an indoor cable and then work your way up to outdoor cable because this stuff is awful. Other than that though, in terms of the cable itself, it passes, but in terms of termination quality, just because it's a pain in the butt, this cable fails. However, I am going to leave it in the testing because of just how hilariously it fails the next test. So without further ado, let's get into the throw tests. So this is the throw test. This is gonna be a test to see how well the cables lie on the ground when thrown out. How flat do they lay? Do they have a bunch of bumps in them? Are they trying to fight gravity and not lay on the ground? So here I have mic cable. Mic cable is, professional cable that's designed to lay on the ground and be thrown out a lot. So we're gonna see how well all these other cables stack up to this mic cable. I'm just gonna throw this out real quick. Now, it got tangled up a bit there at the end, but overall the part that's on the ground and not tangled up is laying perfectly flat. And that is what we want out of all of our Ethernet cables. So let's see how well our Ethernet cables compare. Okay, so the first cable that I'm going to test here, aside from our mic cable, is going to be our regular installation cable that I've put some terminations on. Now, I should probably rewrap this. I'm gonna wrap all of these cables the same, so that way, the way they're wrapped is not playing a part of it. They're all wrapped over under. That's how I wrap all of my cables out. Let's throw this cable out here. That's not very good. As you can see, the cable is bulking up all over the ground. It is not laying flat. It's curving on itself. This is not a good cable for throwing. You can see that the cable bulged up a bunch and is not laying flat on the ground. So this did not really pass our tests. Let's move on to the next cable. All right, the next cable in our test is our outdoor rated Ethernet cable. Again, I'm gonna throw this all out here and we're gonna see how well it lays. Yeah, that failed. This cable just kind of rewrapped itself in comparison to all of our other cables here. And the mic cable, again, is just laying perfectly flat here. So, yeah, this cable didn't even make it 6 feet. All right, the next cable we're gonna test here is gonna be our monoprice cable. This is just the generic monoprice cable that you can get for like $4 for 50 feet of it. So I'm gonna throw this out here. And it made it the distance, but overall it's bulging up and not laying flat on the ground. So again, this one gets a fail. Next we have the Aria-Live Ethernet cable here. So as you can see, the Aria-Live cable started to get tangled up here at the end, but the part that's laying on the ground, same with the mic cable, is laying perfectly flat. And that's what I want to see. So next, let's move on to our last and most expensive cable, the Elite Core cable. So this is the Elite Core flexible Cat 5e cable. I'm gonna throw this one out. Oh, this one better lay flat because this one was really expensive. Overall, that one lays really flat, except for it has a few little bumps in it, but those aren't too bad. Overall, I would say the winner of this test is the Aria-Live cable, and the clear losers are both of the installation cables. Let's take a more up-close look at them. So we have the ends of all of our cables here, except for our outdoor cable, which this massively failed. And we can see how bumpy and not flat the indoor rated cable is. And the outdoor rated cable, yeah, again, just massively failed this test. But we can see our stage grade cables are laying like perfectly flat, along with our mic cable, which again was our standard. And the monoprice cable did not do too bad. It did better than the indoor cable, but nowhere close to what the stage grade cables did. Okay, so now I'm going to straighten all these cables out, lay them across the street, and we're gonna do our durability test. Now, I don't have the luxury of enough time to spend walking over all these cables and using them for, years doing shows, but what I can do is drive over them a bunch with my car, so that's what we're gonna do. One of the things I wanted to make sure I did when I ran over these cables was run over the Ethercon connectors. And yeah, I sufficiently drove over both of these and they kind of got crushed in. But these are converter shell cables, so we should be able to pull off these connector ends and order new ones and not have to replace the entire cable. So overall, I think we have 3 winners. In third place, you can't go wrong with the monoprice cable at $5. So this one gets a pass in my book. Now, first and second place are a bit harder to determine because for me, I place a lot of value on cable flexibility and durability. And the Aria-Live cable feels a lot more durable and flexible because when I drove over these cables and went inside to clean them off, the casing, the jacket of the Elite Core cable feels like it had degraded more due to me driving over it and it getting concrete stuff all in it. Now, if you just want to take your cable out of the packaging and plug it in and use it, get the Elite Core cable and have them terminated in booted RJ45. Don't bother with the converter shell, it's awful. But if you're willing to put in a little bit of work and get your hands dirty, the Aria-Live cable takes the win for me. Editor Jack here again. I forgot to talk about the cable prices. So for the monoprice cable and 50 feet, it's $11.30. The Aria-Live cable for 50 feet is $60, and the Elite Core cable is $60 with the converter shell ends before tax and shipping, matching the price of the Aria-Live cable. Now, if you were to get it in booted RJ45, which is the only way I would recommend you getting the Elite Core cable over the Aria-Live cable, it is $56 before tax and shipping. Tax for me was about $5 and shipping was another $10. So the cable came out to be $15 more expensive than the Aria-Live cable, plus the $2 that I paid for the labeling. So the Aria-Live cable is both the cheaper cable and the cable that I recommend. So back to the video. So both the Elite Core cables and the Aria-Live cables are terminated as converter shells. Now, converter shells mean that it's Ethercon by default, and then you can remove the barrel by twisting it off, and then it becomes just a regular Ethernet jack. Now, converter shell is terrible. Booted RJ45 is great. Ethercon is great. But when you combine the two, both companies are using the same brand of connectors on either end. Here is the Elite Core branded one, and here's the Aria-Live branded one. They both have the same logo. These are from the same manufacturer, and they all have the same issue where in Ethercon mode, it's great. That is not coming out. And if I have a regular RJ45 cable, I can plug that into Ethercon as well. That's one of the great things about Ethercon. But as soon as I take off the Ethercon barrel, it loses its bite. The clip is essentially always forced down, so this cable does not lock whatsoever. And I wanted to try it with multiple cables. So this little segment is being filmed after everything else has been done. So I wanted to have as many cables as possible to test this with. So that was the Elite Core cable. Now I'm gonna bust out all of the Aria-Live cables I have. So this is all of the Aria-Live cables I have, and I'm gonna test it with both ends of all of them. So one in, no bite, no lock, no bite, nothing. Other end, no bite, nothing. So all of these cables that have the converter shell connectors, specifically from whatever brand that both companies are using, suffer from the same issue, where when they're in EtherCon mode, they're great, but in RJ45 mode, they do not lock in place. So if your primary use case for these cables is going to be doing IT work where you're just gonna be using them in RJ45 mode, do not get the cables with the converter shells or be ready to re-terminate. And re-terminating is my favorite option because I really like the Aria-Live cable itself, but I prefer the termination options that Elite Core offers. So I'm just gonna re-terminate this cable myself so that way I can have the best of both worlds. Let's re-terminate some cables. Overall, I've been very happy with the Aria-Live cables. I purchased my first Aria-Live cable months ago, back when my desk was in a temporary setup in that corner of my room, and I've been loving it ever since. I've used it for event after event, and I haven't had any issues. Now, after doing all of my testing, interest of full disclosure, I bought all of the cables that I used for this testing with my own money, so nobody paid for that. The only cable I didn't buy was the cable that my old church gave me, and the monoprice cable, which I nabbed for my dad about 5 years ago, so. But I've been really happy with these Aria-Live cables. I wish they would make a version of it which already just had a booted RJ45 connector, but other than that, these cables are, I can't see anything wrong with them. They're fantastic. They're expensive. These are not the cables that you're gonna be installing for clients. These are the cables that you're gonna keep in your work bag for testing networks, on-the-go use. These are like your IT bag cables. Now overall, for my use cases, I spend a pretty equal amount of time doing both professional work in terms of AV and video production as I do IT. So having half of my cables be EtherCon and half my cables be RJ45 is great for me, although it's really nice that my EtherCon cables can, in a pinch, and it's really only in a pinch, be still used as regular RJ45 cables. So the converter shell is nice, but I wouldn't rely on it. And I would still really like to see Aria-Live offer a version of the Flexsoft stage cable, but more like the Flexsoft IT cable that's just already terminated as booted RJ45. Now, I did all of this testing weeks ago. I'm just now filming it all for you so that way I can make it into a video. But I reached out to Aria-Live and said, hey, you guys make great cables. They won my little contest here. Would you like to send me some cables that I can showcase in my video? And they said, sure. So they sent me some of their different lengths of cable. They offer the Flexsoft stage cable in 3 different lengths. They have a 50-foot version, a 25-foot version, and a 15-foot version. Now, these cables are amazing, and thank you to Aria-Live for sending them to me. They will be put to very good use. But thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. Leave a like if you liked it. If you didn't, there's another button there that you can use too. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.